All right, Charlie, I think we should go ahead and get going. We got a good number of people on, and they can join as we start. Thanks.
Thanks, Karen. My name is Charlie McCabe. I'm a park consultant. I'm formerly part of the Trust for Public Lands Center for City Park Excellence. I'm here to welcome you today to this peer-to-peer session on stewardship programs in marginalized communities. We're real excited to have you here today. And we're also pleased that this peer-to-peer network is being hosted by our co-chairs for this effort, Eric Landau, who's president of Brooklyn Bridge Park, who's waving now, and then Jesse Brackenberry, who's the executive director of the Rose Kennedy Greenway Conservancy in Boston. Today's topic is effective park stewardship in marginalized communities. And this is part of an ongoing series of member-exclusive peer-to-peer events, both online and in person, facilitated by the City Parks Alliance. And we know that there are diverse communities engaging effectively in parks across the United States. And this is a big issue. A lot of us are facing kind of specific challenges around this. And we're hoping that this conversation today gives you an opportunity to both listen from one of the leaders in the field, as well as to kind of share your thoughts. And we'll hopefully address some of the questions that you've raised in your comments to us. And we also want to note that this conversation has been made possible with support from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and we appreciate their support. So the first thing I want to do is ask everybody to turn on their cameras and open up their microphones. And we're going to ask you to do a very, very quick round of introductions before we turn it over to Renée Myers, who's the executive director of the Forest Park Conservancy in Portland. And we'd like you to introduce yourself with your name, your organization, and the city that you're from. And I'll start first with Alice Bridges.
Hello, I'm Alice Bridges. I'm with AOB Consulting, and I'm in Louisville, Kentucky.
Great. Ann Olson.
Hi, I'm Ann Olson. I'm president of Buffalo Bayou Partnership in Houston.
Great, thanks, Ann. Connie Matsui.
Hi, I'm Connie Matsui with the Balboa Park Conservancy in San Diego, California.
Ann Grossman.
Hi, I'm Ann Grossman with Forest Park Forever. We're in Forest Park in St. Louis, Missouri.
Great. And Meg, maybe Megan? Sorry.
Meg Harris?
Yes.
Yeah. My last name does not look like it sounds. So Meg Harris, and I with the Beacon Park Foundation, a newer park here in Detroit.
Thanks, Meg. Debbie Houston.
I'm Debbie Houston. I'm with the City of Raleigh Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources.
Nicole Henderson.
Hi, I'm Nicole Henderson Roy. I'm with the New York City Park Stewardship Program in NYC.
Scott Payne.
Scott Payne, City of Raleigh Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Bridget Ambrisco.
Hi, I'm Bridget Ambrisco. I'm with Akron Parks Collaborative in Akron, Ohio.
Let's see, Bree Winters.
Yes, hello.
You want to introduce yourself, Bree? Name and organization and city?
Yes, so I am Brianna Winters with the Highline Canal Conservancy in Denver, Colorado.
Great, thanks a lot. Cynthia Aguilar.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Aguilar with the City of Phoenix Parks and Recreation Department.
Eric Landau.
Hi, I'm Eric Landau, Brooklyn Bridge Park in Brooklyn, New York.
Great. Gabby.
Hi, I'm Gabby. I'm a recreation coordinator for the City of Burien Parks Department, and Burien is the city just to the south of Seattle, Washington.
Fantastic. Grace Sheeler, my apologies if I mispronounced your name. Grace, okay. Jesse Brackenberry.
Yeah, I'm Jesse Brackenberry. I'm from the Rose Kennedy Greenway Conservancy in Boston and the lucky recipient of Charlie McCabe's volunteer services in our park.
Thanks, Jesse. Josh Otero.
Hello, I'm Josh Otero. I'm with the Natural Areas Conservancy in New York City.
Great. Keelan Caldwell.
Keelan Caldwell, also from the Rose Kennedy Greenway Conservancy in Boston.
Kelly Burnett.
Hey, Kelly Burnett, Houston Parks Board. I'm in Houston, Texas.
Great. Lisa Otsumi.
Hi, I'm Lisa Utsumi. Good job pronouncing my name, by the way, Charlie.
Every once in a while.
Lisa Utsumi from the City of Raleigh Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Department in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Michelle White.
Hi, Michelle White from the National Recreation and Park Association in Northern.
Great. Natalie from GGNCP.
Hey, I'm Natalie Korngold. I'm from the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy based in San Francisco.
Great. Sarah Tracy.
Hi, I'm Sarah Tracy with the Institute for Urban Parks at the Central Park Conservancy in NYC.
Susan Wilkins.
Hi, I'm Susan Wilkins from the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Susanna Jones.
Hi, Charlie. Hi, I'm Susanna. I'm also with the Highline Canal Conservancy in Denver, Colorado.
Will Mateo.
Hi, Will Mateo here. I work for the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy, primarily in Marin County, California.
And hopefully, finally, Yakuta Punawala.
Hi, everyone. My name is Yakuta Punawala, and I'm also from the No problem. I'm also from the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy and help with the park stewardship programs based here in San Francisco.
Okay. Anyone I did not call?
Me, Christina
My apologies,
Smith from
Mary.
Grand Rock Bridgeport.
Nice to meet you. Anybody else?
Hi, Jean King. I think I just came in late.
Also me, I'm Mary Owens with City of Raleigh.
Nice to meet you, Mary. Nice to meet you, Jean. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody, for your quick round of introductions. That'll help, hopefully, in facilitating our discussion in a little bit. Right now, what I want to do is turn it over to Renée Myers, who's the Executive Director of the Forest Park Conservancy in Portland, Oregon. And Renee is going to give us a few thoughts about stewardship and some of the unique ways in which her organization has been working to foster stewardship and work with marginalized communities. So without further ado, we're going to turn it over to Renee for some of her comments.
Awesome. Thank you. I actually see some familiar faces, which is pretty awesome. Yeah, I wanted to, thank City Park Alliance and Charlie. It's so awesome to be here and, share some of our work that we're doing, but also, to be part of this broader conversation because it's such a wonderful community where we can all learn from each other. So I'm also really excited to hear about some of the things that you are doing and potentially share some ideas. So yeah, it's great because, our parks and natural areas wouldn't be as well maintained and taken care of and loved if it wasn't for all of you and the folks that participate within your organizations. And there's so many different ways that I think you can think about stewardship. But, for us, the first thing we think about is connection. If people have a connection to your park or natural area, then they're going to put some kind of value on that. And everybody, values things or parks and natural areas for different reasons. It may be intrinsic, it may be wildlife, it may be that they're going there because it just provides them, physical and mental well-being, especially these days with COVID. And for those of us on the West Coast, a lot of wildfires were occurring this year. But, I think that if you can really better understand why people are connecting, and what their values are, then you have a better opportunity to offer people a real meaningful, authentic way to engage, not just, with the place that you're stewarding, but also with your organization and trying to build that long-term relationship. It's really interesting because it's not just about an individual. When we think of stewardship as a whole, it's your whole community, whether it's a business or a partner organization or it's a partner agency, you are all working together to, steward this amazing, amazing place. And, I think one of the first things that we had to do was have a better idea of why are people connecting to Forest Park. And I love that the other Forest Park is here too, by the way, I just have to say that. But, having a better understanding of why people are connecting and why they value the space, because I think once, you can understand that value, you can better connect and engage with people. And there's a lot of different things that we've done over time to kind of, collect that data, whether it was focus groups, which are an amazing, space to really engage people, surveys, you can send out like a survey monkey from your email. But also the one thing that I think people overlook lots of times is that there are a lot of organizations out there, and maybe that you currently partner with, that have already asked the questions and have the information. And I think the one thing and the trap that we fall into many times is, asking different communities over and over again, why do you value nature? Why is this important to you? What do you value? And, I think that in general, if it's kind of your area, you can very easily take information that partner organizations have collected and utilize that for your own organization. And so when we think about our stewardship program and having, effective stewardship that's meaningful, there's two things that we really like to think about. Number one is, do the people who are engaging with you as a volunteer or a partner, do they feel like they're making a difference in what you're doing? Actively making a difference? Are you engaging them in a way that makes them feel like they are making a difference? And number two, do they see their values reflected in what you're doing as an organization? And, it's not just about the connection to the place, but it's about a connection to your organization, because you want a long-term, resilient, sustainable program where you're continually engaging these people over time. And so if they don't see their values reflected in what you're doing, there's a really good chance that they're not going to continue to engage with you over the long haul, which means that, that's less people that are, stewarding your park or your natural area, which is really, really important. And just knowing that, these relationships and building this amazing, community of stewards takes time, especially with marginalized communities. And so, I'm excited to hear about what you're all doing and excited to share more about some of the programs and experiences we've had here in Portland. So yeah, thanks, Charlie.
Great, thanks, Renee. And we're going to encourage folks to ask questions that they may have. And also want to welcome both Allison and Beth, who were two arrivals that didn't get a chance to introduce themselves, but we appreciate you guys joining us today. And Renee, before we kind of kick it off, I just want to ask one of the questions that we heard from some of the attendees. In looking at stewardship, what do you think is kind of like a first step that like a park or park agency can take in really kind of engaging with the community to kind of, begin the process of stewardship?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one thing comes back to is, these stewardship benefits go both ways, right? Like, it's not just about what the community can do as far as stewardship for your park, but also what benefits is your park providing the community? Because when you think about resiliency of both our communities and our parks and natural areas, they're so connected and intertwined. And so you have to think about both of those things. And, when we think about, kind of continuing to engage people, the first thing we think about is, do they have access? And if they don't have access, then they're not going to be able to have that connection. So one of the first things that we work on is, how do we minimize the barriers that people have to actually accessing, number one, the park, and also the programs within our organization. Are they inclusive? Are they diverse? Are they culturally relevant? And do people feel safe and comfortable both in the park and engaging with our organization?
So what's one of the ways in which you've kind of brought people into the park that may have not been in the park before? How have you kind of gone about that?
That's a great question. Well, there's several different ways. One of the things that we really like to do is partner with our community organizations. So a lot of our community organizations that we work with are either, when we're thinking about access, are, led by people of color, or, they are directly serving people of color. You don't always have to go into a community and say, hey, come join us, in Forest Park, be part of our organization. There are already wonderful organizations that are already established in these different communities, and partnering with them, getting to know their community through these organizations who they already feel very comfortable with. It's easier for them to, what we have found, engage in Forest Park, because they're engaging in the park with an organization that they trust, with a community that is very comfortable. And many times we have bilingual events so that people feel like the first time they're engaging with the park, they're engaging in a way that is comfortable for them, because English is not necessarily their first language. And so there are kind of these other organizations, our partner organizations are like a bridge to Forest Park, which allows their first experience to be more comfortable. The other thing that we did 2 years ago was launch a volunteer ambassador program, where at numerous trailheads during the summertime, say on a weekend, we have ambassadors that are stationed at a lot of the busy trailheads, and some of our ambassadors are bilingual, so people have an opportunity, depending on which community, they have a culturally relevant kind of experience, the first time in the park, or they can ask directions, or there's a bilingual map of the park that is, easier for them to kind of navigate their first experience in the park. You're on mute.
Okay. Yeah, no, thanks. So thanks, Renee, for those responses. We do have one question in the chat, but I want to open up to folks that might have other questions. We're going to continue in kind of a Q&A format with Renee for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to open it up to a broader discussion. But do folks have burning questions for Renee at the moment? Feel free to jump in.
Hey, I have a question. Hey, Renee,
Go ahead,
it's
Sarah.
good to see you.
Hey, Sarah.
Hey, yeah, I thought I loved your point about like trying to rely on partners for both gathering information and spreading information. Can you tell me a little bit more about like what a successful partnership looks like what you need from them, what they might need from you in order to make a relationship like that work?
Yeah, that's actually a really wonderful question. So one of the things, and I'm going to give an example of a wonderful organization we work with that serves the Latinx community. They're called Vive Northwest, and they really try to get the Latinx community engaged and in the outdoors. And we have partnered with them, not just on events in the park, but they've also created bilingual videos for us for our ambassador program and just for the park in general. And so, it's not just about, a partnership and, building kind of this long, term relationship, but it's also about how are we supporting these partners? Not just, but financially is a really big piece of that too, right? And so we want to support our partner organizations financially. And so most of the grants that we write in any kind of partnership with our different organizations, there is always a portion of the budget, and usually 3/4 of the budget of that grant that actually goes to our partner organization to support their efforts and their staff and any kind of outreach that they're doing within their community. That's a really big one for us.
Okay, and we also got a question about what the name of the partner organization, Viva Verde Northwest, was. Susan Wilkins, you posted a question. Would you like to answer it in person? Ask it in person?
I was just wondering if you have any methods for evaluating how people feel in your park spaces, and if they really feel welcome, if they end up returning, if they feel like their needs are met. Have you ever worked on kind of assessing that?
Yes, we have. So we've done a couple things. We did an organizational assessment a year ago, actually asking our constituents and, folks on our email list that we know that use the park, which is almost 5,000, what they value most about the park and our organization, and it was kind of like a self-evaluation of, our work. And then the other one we did was very specific about asking people, and it was a partnership actually with Portland State University, who is a really big partner of ours, of, do you feel comfortable in the park? Do you feel safe? If you don't feel safe, why is it that you don't feel safe? And then also better understanding what the access, barriers to access were, within the park, whether it was transportation or people didn't feel safe, or they just didn't really know how to get to the park. So there's a lot of different surveys, or several different really important surveys that we have done. But some of the major ones, we've partnered with a university like Portland State University with professors that could, number one, help us take the data and analyze it, but also get the word out to more people than just our organization, because we wanted to have a broader reach. So we've partnered a lot with them to get some really wonderful information.
And are there any themes with the feedback that you received, particularly from people who may be in marginalized communities, that could be maybe universally applied?
We did. That's a really great question. Yeah, we were able to analyze a lot of our data based on zip code, which was great, and people who identified as from BIPOC communities. And so what we had realized that obviously, higher income white folks from around the park felt very safe and, didn't really feel like they had any access barriers. But then, if you took, a person of color, from say the east side of Portland, especially, if you kind of looked at, the sexual orientation, like women did not feel safe, especially Black women and Black men. And access was a big barrier as well, just because, if you think low income people that were very honest on the survey didn't necessarily have access to a vehicle to get to the park, and there's not great public transportation to Forest Park, which that was a barrier as well. And so yes, we were able to there are very much themes throughout the data results based on income, race, and also, between male and female. And not just male, female, but, those genders that identify, there's other genders. And so, they did not necessarily feel safe either. And so we were able to kind of, take this information, and then right now we're kind of going through it and figuring out with Portland Parks and Recreation, how do we address these issues, and how do we increase public transportation, and trying to address some of these barriers over the next few years.
Out of curiosity, what kind of demographic information did you ask?
Let's see, we asked race, gender, economic status, and zip code. I think that was like the 4, as far as like, personal information.
Did you have anybody that didn't answer all of those questions?
No, we actually did not.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Renee, can you talk a little bit about the other side of the equation? So in terms of what your community partners, residents, what their contribution is in the stewardship equation?
Yeah, that's kind of a loaded question, but yeah, so, it really just depends. Like I mentioned in the beginning, different people like to kind of participate in stewardship in different ways. And so we have various ways that people can engage with the organization. Not everyone wants to get out into the park with what people think of class of stewardship, right? Or maintain trails, pull ivy, like that is just not for everybody, and specific cultures, that is definitely not something that they, really want to participate in. But there's other ways, we have volunteer hike leaders, folks that really want to take youth out on educational hikes, or, have an interest in mushrooms or trees or plant identification. They can engage with us that way. We have volunteer trail ambassadors, like I talked about before, where folks can, come and represent the organization. But we also have roaming ambassadors, where they're actually hiking different loops or walking different loops in the park, and really just collecting information from off-leash dogs to the number of people on each trail, amount of garbage, all different ways, all different data they're collecting. But then we also have people that are kind of introverts, they come into the office and they want to stuff envelopes, or they're, are really good at reviewing grants. So they review grants for us. I mean, there really is so many different ways that we have volunteers that want to give back to the organization because they love Forest Park. So it's really, there's kind of a fit for everybody if we can just find out what their interest is and how they really want to engage, and we can usually find a fit for them.
Other questions? We have a few more minutes before we switch to kind of more of a sharing about what's worked in different organizations. If not, I'll ask another one of the questions that we got submitted earlier. Renee, how have you gone about training your staff on essentially cultural competency? Just thinking about how to deal with all the different communities and what tools and resources your staff might need.
Well, it's been
Can I add a piece to that question?
Please do, Allison. Yeah.
In addition to training the staff? I almost hear in that question an assumption that your staff cares and knows it's important. And if you could just speak to how to make sure it's of value as well as something people know how to work toward.
Ah, that's great, Allison. Thank you for bringing that up. I actually really appreciate that. So yeah, so we have gone through a very large organizational transition over the last 6 years since we started this work. And Allison, in the beginning, not everybody was on board and not everybody thought that it was important. Folks did not understand why we were taking this overarching equity lens to everything that we do. And over time, we've actually had to change kind of our institutional, not just culture, but kind of our overall mission and just kind of, flip it on its head. And now we have gotten to a point where it is the top priority. Everything that we do is institutionalized and has, basically kind of like a Jedi lens, but it took us a while to get there. And that's, changing your internal culture from the demographic composition of your board to your staff, but also your volunteers. And it takes time. And, our staff has gone through a lot of training. Our board has gone through a lot of training, but, that's not enough. You have to think about it, or we have, holistically as an organization. And so now we have developed training for our volunteer crew leaders and anybody that is engaging, our ambassadors, our rapid response team, anybody that is engaging with our constituents or engaging with people in the park that is representing FPC has to go through different levels of equity training. And the first level this year, we actually made it mandatory. You cannot represent the organization as a volunteer unless you have gone through this training. And that does not, that a lot of people, if they've been around a while, may not always feel comfortable with that or like that. It's the same as when we started, introducing, kind of like she, her, hers at each of our stewardship events. You have longtime volunteers, honestly, being very transparent that were, 65-year-old white men that just did not feel comfortable with that. And we got pushback on that, but we didn't stop what we were doing. It's okay if they don't feel comfortable. We try to work with, each individual volunteer with their own comfort level, but we were not compromising the importance of some of, these processes and steps and making people feel comfortable. And so, yeah, we've really developed training at every level of the organization and made it mandatory. And over time, we've just attracted folks within the organization, especially staff and board, that really, really value this work and know that every day it's a conversation and every day we are going to be, thinking about it within our programs. And now there's no push and pull. It's kind of a holistic approach and everybody feels very passionate about and engaged in the work within the organization, but it took a while.
Great. Well, thanks, Renee, for all of the answers to all your questions. We're going to shift a little bit. Renee will obviously weigh in on more things, but what we want to do is give people an opportunity to talk about some of their experiences in their organizations and ways in which they've engaged marginalized communities, local residents, and others in both park stewardship and programming. And we have a few of our colleagues on the line right now that volunteered in advance, which is very wonderful of them, to kind of share their ideas briefly. So I'm going to start by asking Bridget Briscoe in Akron to talk about her experiences with these efforts.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So my organization actually manages a program called the Akron Parks Challenge. And once a year, we put it out to our entire community, the entire city of Akron, asking people to give us their best idea for their city park and then how they can help us engage the community around it. So our parks have been neglected for decades. And so a lot of the parks are in serious disrepair. And we weren't sure how people were going to respond to this, but within, the first year, which was in 2018, we had 68 people applying from all over the city, from every single ward. And it actually was difficult to choose. But what I loved about how this program worked out is that community leaders were sort of self-selecting so that we could work directly with those leaders to engage the rest of the community. So we had a committee that went through, and we really did try to choose we were choosing 2 parks at a time to choose them through an equity lens, looking at income, looking at quantitative factors, but also qualitative, like if something happened in this park, how much more of an improvement or how much would it impact the neighborhood compared to another park? When's the last time it had any sort of improvement in the park? And one of the big things that the city called on us for too was the stewardship piece, that as we're making improvements, they have no way to increase their budget for maintenance. So we sort of took on that role of helping to build stewardship groups for each park that we worked in. And it helped that we had these leaders at the very beginning. So I guess the point being that, the tactic we're really taking is that we've been able to find wonderful community leaders that know their community a lot better than I would, that I can sort of do my best to support. And it's been very well received, and we've been able to form friends groups around each of the parks that we've worked with.
Great, thanks so much, Bridget. And I'll just also note that in the chat, Ann Grossman from Forest Park Forever in St. Louis also gave us a little overview of a multi-year in-depth study for both visitors and communities working with Washington University in St. Louis there. And she's happy to connect with folks that might have an interest in that. They are in process right now, and they've also had to substitute some of their in-person work with kind of socially distanced surveying. Do other folks have examples or kind of questions about kind of engaging with communities and really kind of focusing on this work more broadly that they'd like to bring up at this time?
Charlie, can I just I have a follow-up question for Bridget. This is Karen with City Parks Alliance. Bridget, right. I was wondering, I know that in a lot of lower income or marginalized communities, sometimes they don't have people the leadership capacity to apply for things like that or even step up. What did you guys do? Did you have to do anything proactively to try and reach out to those communities and engage them in that process?
Yeah, we did. So the first thing we did is to try to make it as easy as possible. It was just 2 questions, and online or written at their community center or what have you. And then the first year especially, I really tried to connect with the city council reps, connect with organizations, just to make sure that we were reaching all ends of the city and making sure, that it was as easy as possible for people to apply. And the other question I just saw, it's actually funded by the city of Akron. So it's $100,000 per park that they set aside in their capital budget. But one of the coolest things I think is that each community that I've worked with, and I've worked with 5 so far, has decided that's not enough money. And so I've gotten to work with them to apply for more funds, and they've been really successful adding to that. And then, all the other partners that they've brought in to bring some funding and some resources as well. It's been every single park, that's what's happened.
That's amazing. And Akron is also a Knight city, so I know it's benefited from some of the projects through the Knight Foundation as well. That's great. I'm going to call in another person, unless somebody else has another burning issue or question for Bridget, or wants to bring up another issue.
Hey, Charlie, I just want to say, because I was just looking in the chat, the name of the organization is Vive Northwest, VIVE, and then Northwest.
Thank you.
And Verde was the other organization that we worked with on the partnership, the restoration partnership agreement.
I confused the 2.
Which I will explain at some point in the conversation.
Great. Okay. Can I ask Brianna Winters from the Highline Canal Conservancy to talk about your work?
Hello. So the Highline Canal is a 71-mile, both canal, the ditch, and then a trail. And so the Conservancy is working to protect, preserve, and enhance the 71-mile trail to make it more user-friendly in communities in Aurora, which, if you're familiar with Colorado, there's Denver. Aurora is another large municipality, as well as a total of 11 jurisdictions. But a lot of the low-income and marginalized communities are in Aurora. And so that's an area of the trail that's been, it hasn't received all the resources it's needed over the last few decades. And so our project is to both engage the community in those areas where we do see a lot of low usership. So we don't see as many people on the trail in the first place in these areas as we do down south in more affluent communities. So first it's figuring out where is everybody? And then for the people that are on the trail, getting to know them, how they use it, and what they'd like to see enhanced to make it more friendly, whether that's shade structures or benches, new trees. And so we're in the early stages of a project called Neighborhood Canal Improvements that we're doing in partnership with the Colorado Health Foundation to specifically activate people in these areas as far as physical activity. And so we're just looking for ideas. It's me and also Susanna Jones, who's on the call. We are just figuring out our community engagement strategy to both figure out what people want to see as far as actually installing these enhancements, and then just really getting to know the community that we don't have a stake in already. Again, the Conservancy is just one nonprofit across 11 jurisdictions, 71 miles. And so we have to first create a presence in that area before getting to know everyone, getting the input, and moving forward with the enhancements. So it's a long process that we're just on the cusp of. And if Susanna, you want to add anything, please go ahead.
Please do, Susanna.
Thanks, Brianna. Yeah, the only thing I'll add is that at the same time, we're a fairly new organization. We're, I guess, 6 years old at this point, but at the same time too, Brianna's quite involved in building a robust volunteer network. And you see, and so we have a whole suite of programs, mostly cleanups, and then we also do walks, and so a mix of stewardship and recreation programs. But what we're trying to do this year, and Brianna's gotten a really great start on, is build volunteer leaders so that they can help run some of these programs. And to this point, all of our volunteer leaders are from these more affluent communities. And so our hope for 2021 is to bring that stewardship focus and really build some volunteer ambassadors and leaders in these Northeast communities in Aurora, at the same time as we're trying to also involve them in our implementation and sort of community-based planning efforts to improve the canal.
That's great. Have you guys found any best ways for outreach or engagement with these communities? I mean, has one way worked better than others for you so far? Or is
We've started with the schools, just as, you know, Renee mentioned, find existing partners. And so for some of the first neighborhoods, the biggest community partners are the schools. So we've started there, but we started this year. And, you know, with COVID, that's been really tough. So we had plans to keep then engaging the churches and then engaging the health organizations. We had a whole list of stakeholders, and hopefully we'll get to all that. But that was our first step, just really introducing ourselves. Again, our name is not known. We're not like a famous park in that area just yet. So
that's great. And yeah, and the task is daunting because you have 71 miles of canal and ditch and trail to deal with. And that's amazing.
And to that note, Charlie, I mean, so we, our organization has been primarily focused on planning up until last year, I'd say. And so we went through a very comprehensive vision planning process where we did engage with all the communities along 71 miles. But as you all know, and as you can imagine, that deeper level of connection, that's what Brianna is working on this year and has gotten, you know, started on. But that's where we really need more work. And because that comprehensive vision planning, you know, while we engaged with over 5,000 people across the region throughout it, it didn't dive deep into those communities that we weren't seeing on the trail or that weren't hearing about our open house, you know. And so that's where we really need to step into this engagement. And the other thing too, is I will say, is that a couple of them volunteer leaders that Brianna's working with this year actually did come from stewardship programs that we were doing. So we're sort of seeing that it's all really tied together, the community engagement and the programs that we're offering.
That's great. Thank you guys so much for that. Does anybody have any follow-up questions for the presenters that have that have spoken so far, or do you want to kind of talk about your experience? Want to jump in?
I just have a question for Brianna. Is like with your partners and your programming, are you working with them to co-create programming, or kind of how does that relationship work?
So far, yes. We've only really been able to do 2 engagements. So like when I'm at the high school, I'm definitely talking to the family and community liaison about what's the best way to meet the students. So I'm working with her to figure that out. We planned a little Halloween event on the trail, and we did so completely with our ambassadors that Susanna mentioned came from actually our trash cleanup program. So we had a few lovely Latina ladies who just loved the work we were doing, and they kind of came to us. So it made it easy. And then we just met over Zoom to plan this event. So yes, we're definitely co-creating as much as possible. And for this entire project and the enhancements, the idea was to do these prototypes where we would actually put prototypes of the enhancements on the trail, whether that's nature play, exercise stations, so people can see like what we're up to and give live feedback. We wanted to meet people where they were, so anyone who is on the trail can be like, what are all these logs doing here? And we can talk to them about it. So again, COVID was an issue and a barrier, but all of our planning is absolutely about co-creation. We really don't want to implement any enhancements without the surveys and without the community feedback. So.
That's great. Go ahead, Nicole.
It's almost like a question and sort of a follow-up to the follow-up for some of our panelists and the folks in the room. And this idea of co-creation and building trust and both managing expectations. I think like Bridget and Renee both like talked about topics where sometimes as a program manager who's like so deep within communities, it's something I struggle with in terms of we are very much asking them to bring a lot to the table, but we're not always able to reciprocate and sort of how y'all manage that, especially with people of color, poor communities who already are dealing with so many issues, and then especially with COVID. So I'm just kind of curious. It's just something I struggle with as a professional.
Great question.
I wanted to add in that question too, because, one thing I'm seeing more and more is, one of my questions was going to be about the park ambassadors that Renee has. Are they paid? And I think, that's something important to consider for certain projects and things.
No, that's a great thing. So with our ambassadors, they are not paid positions, but they get, if they need public transportation or, they get public transit passes to be able to get from one place to another. And we recently just put in a grant for electric vehicles that can be located on the east side so that our ambassadors and other volunteers can actually utilize electric vehicles to get to the park. But, what we started doing, and this was actually a partnership so we have a workforce development program where we have 4 BIPOC young adults that spend a year with us as an intern, learning a lot of professional skills with natural resources. They get paid a living wage. We have one fellow who will be staying on an additional year who'll get health insurance and benefits. And we, a year and a half ago, started a program with the Rosa Parks School District, which serves about 90% underserved youth on the east side of Portland. And what we started doing was actually not expecting them to come to Forest Park or, thinking that they necessarily had the ability every week to be able to come to Forest Park. And so there's an organization called Elevate Oregon who is basically located within the school district, and they mentor and provide extra support for youth that may need it. And there's about 95% of the participating students are our BIPOC youth. And so we started going to their neighborhood and to their school. And so we actually saw them 4 times a month. It's a year-long program. And the first 3 weeks of the month, we actually went to their school and did environmental education with their 7th and 8th grade classes. We visited parks around their school to make it relevant so that it was in their community. And kind of felt like they had a sense of place, you know, in their own neighborhood. And then the 4th week is when they were actually able to come out to Forest Park for an entire half a day every month. And so it was this really wonderful balance of kind of getting, we got Nicole, of, you know, going to other, you know, going to those communities. It's not always about them coming to you or them providing, but, you know, what kind of support are you providing to them in their own communities? And so we started doing more and more of that. And the relationship has also gotten stronger, which is a wonderful thing. And, you know, stipends and yeah, providing funding to all of your partners, you know, like we would never come to the table and ask one of our partner organizations to partner without having some kind of, you know, financial responsibility to that partner for all of the work that they're doing.
Thanks, Renee. Does anybody else have any examples or any other suggestions of things that have worked well in their organizations, their parks? If not, I'll call on another one of our volunteers, Kathleen James from the city of Pontiac. Do you want to talk about your program and the work that you've been doing?
Goodness. Well, yes, we're a friends group. And we're a volunteer program. I started it after I retired because our parks were in pretty bad shape, and they really had not seen real improvement in 50 years. And at the time, the city was in financial management. We're in the state of Michigan, Pontiac, Michigan, and we are in Oakland County, which is one of the wealthiest counties in the country. Oakland County, I think, is in the top 10 wealthiest counties in the country. And yet, you know, we're in our city, most of our parks hadn't seen upgrades in 50 years. And when you look at the data from Oakland County, the data showed that minorities normally just do not take advantage of county parks. The county has a beautiful park system, but most low-income people do not visit those county parks. And so that was a concern, you know, to me, that our residents should be able to go to the park and to take full advantage of parks in their own area. And so we started the group and committed to working with the city in a positive way to make improvements in those parks. And as a ex-GM, a retired GM employee, I connected with General Motors and with they do quite a bit of volunteer work in the community. And they have annual volunteer days. So I started with them and made some great partnerships with General Motors doing special projects in the park. And we were able to just paint. And I mean, those guys did projects that were just unbelievable. That you know, the talent and the skill of and they thought nothing of it. But I mean, they literally put thousands of dollars in our parks, and they made, you know, we began to make a huge difference, and the park usage began to go up, and the city, you know, was working with us. You know, there's just a lot of things going on, but we were able to really step in at a time when nobody was doing anything. And so we got the interest there. So today, we started in 2012. Today, most residents are very, very much aware of the parks now. This, you know, COVID for us was a real eye opener because the park usage went through the roof with COVID as it did in most areas. And we were ready. We got a grant this summer with United Way, a COVID response grant. We put hand sanitizing stations in the parks. We were able to fund 2 walking trails for 2 of the parks in lower income areas. So we have seen a lot of growth in what we're talking about, just of getting the engagement, because in low income areas, engagement is very important. It's not there generally because that's not a place that resident wants to go. And they just don't, the difference is they don't make a big deal of it. They just don't go. And so you have to, when you get in there and begin to work and begin to put things there, and the attractiveness, and looking at the attractiveness of that park, looking at the safety of that park, it will make a difference. And you'll find that people will begin to utilize those spaces. And that's what we have seen. So we're just now at the place where we would like to get into some of the larger partnerships of maybe bringing some monies into and some funding into the city. We'd like to see more of a commitment on the part of Oakland County Parks and Rec to do more. I am championing them to actually put a county park in the city of Pontiac. So there's a lot that can be done with advocacy once you get the community engaged. So I think we've done the step 1. We've got an engaged community now, and we've got an engaged, even the political leaders have kind of, so we've got good political engagement and support now. Now's the time to expand that and to begin to ask for or to demand that equity from the county level and even from the state level of what needs to be done, for our city. So, and that growth is where I need the help of understanding, because, we just kind of started and grew from there. But, and I appreciate being a part of Park Alliance. I learn a lot from the professionals and people that are on, get good ideas from everybody. But we need to be able to grow beyond where we are. And I'm not quite sure how to go about doing that, but we've made a good start. We just need to move further, in a larger direction.
That's fantastic. What a great story. And I mean, it sounds like you retired, but you really didn't in many ways. But I mean, it's a great story. And a lot of us come from similar backgrounds and similar roots. And I think you're right in pushing toward the county and the state, who are, I mean, park systems at the county level are very well funded in Michigan, largely because they're park districts. And they have taxing entities. And the state actually is a good source. We've seen that happen in a couple of different parks in the city of Detroit that were like Belle Isle is a good example that was taken on through a joint partnership with the state. We have a few minutes left. Do people have other comments, other questions, other things they'd like to raise?
I've got one. So several of you guys have mentioned grants and funding. What about for municipalities who are not 501c3 nonprofits? It's a lot harder to get those grants and funding. And is there any suggestions for that?
I mean, I'll just start with, looking for nonprofit partners that can apply for specific grants, especially like health related grants, economic development related grants. There might be another partner, business improvement district, a civic organization, a civic society, others that might be having to do that without having to set up a separate nonprofit. I think it depends what you're looking to fund and what the scope is out there. Usually cities can apply for a lot of grants. It depends on the foundation, I guess is what I would say.
This is Karen with City Parks Alliance. I'll jump in there. We have a new equitable funding hub on our website. So I'd recommend you check that out. It's organized by, it's all focused on funding for parks in low income communities. So it's focused around community development related funds, brownfields funds, conservation funds that are specifically focused on with an equitable lens. So I'd recommend you check that out. And it's particularly good for local governments. I think that more of the sources on there are relevant to local governments. So you can find it on our website. It's called the Equitable Funding Hub.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen. Well, and with that, we have just a few minutes left. So we want to wrap up our program. And we want to thank, obviously, you for attending. We wanted to thank Renée Myers for presenting and answering so many questions on behalf of this Forest Park Conservancy. And we have a few things that we'd like you to do as you head on to the rest of your day. The first is to please fill out a survey that will come into your inboxes immediately following the call. It's only 3 questions. It takes just a few minutes, but it'll really help us gauge how we're doing in these peer-to-peer calls and to also prepare the way for future calls. The second thing is we have a few upcoming events and resources. We're going to have another peer-to-peer learning session in February. And Karen mentioned the Equitable Park Funding Hub that's available on the City Park Alliance website. But we also want you to save the date for the City Park Alliance Greater and Greener Virtual Summer Series, which will take place from June 14th to 25th. In 2021, and that'll be a great way to meet with more of your peers, talk more in depth on different elements and efforts, and really kind of continue the conversation. Renée has asked specifically that if you have specific follow-ups or want to talk about the challenges of maintaining with city partners large urban parks that happen to be naturally forested areas, I think she would welcome the discussion, and she's more than willing to kind of continue that. We'd also like to thank the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation for the support of peer-to-peer programming for the City Parks Alliance. And we really thank you for coming and joining us on a late afternoon in the East Coast. And we hope that you'll stay involved with the work of the City Parks Alliance and with urban park work across the country.